How you doing, EHour students? It's nice to be back with you for another Friday. Hi, Kate. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you?
Good. Good. So, EHour students, we're going to do things a little bit differently today. We are not going to use our traditional deck because, frankly, why not? Frankly, if we're not doing something different, innovating, then we're getting boring, and that's not really our job here. So let's change it up a little. As always, I want to go through a couple housekeeping items and let you know about a couple things that I want to be in your heads as you're going through the rest of this month and the assignments that we have due at the end of the month, not next week, at the end of the month. Regarding the mentoring network and the questions that you're submitting, please go back and click the little thank you button that is within the email prompt that you get from the system. Even if you've already had the conversation with the mentor and with the alum, if you've had that maybe over the phone or in a separate email, I know it's a pain and I totally appreciate why you would see that as just an unnecessary step. However, as we're working the bugs out of the system, it helps us to build the data set we need to know where interactions are and then to follow up on your behalf to make sure you're getting the responses you do. Otherwise, we don't know if in fact you've had that connection with the alum. So please go through and click that thank you button in the email after you've completed your call or interaction with them. Secondly, regarding those questions, when you're formulating the question that you're going to submit to the mentor network, again, the prompts are in those announcements and we kind of give some detail about what should be included in some examples. But what I really kind of want to boil it down for you to think about is ask questions that you can't Google. Ask questions that you can't search that are going to be pieces of information, experiences, insights, expertise that you can get through an alum's lens and through their perspective that they're willing to share with you. If you're asking a question that's really generic in nature and seems like something that you could Google and read, about within the first couple hits, it's not really going to do anything to benefit you more so than it is the engagement with the alum. And we want to make sure that you guys have an opportunity to not only get the information you need, but that also the opportunity to engage with an alum and build a relationship in a way that's off of a solid foundation that demonstrates your curiosity and your ability to critically think. So just those 2 points I wanted to call out, and that's all for housekeeping today. And back to our guest at hand. A little bit of background on her. She grew up on the East Coast, I presume in Maryland, given her degrees, the other U of M, if you will. And we lured her over to Michigan to get a degree in education. And while she was here, she started looking into teaching and working as a teacher for a little while at the Ann Arbor School for Girls. And then she got whisked away. Her and her husband went off to the West Coast, to San Francisco, the land of milk and honey and golden opportunity. And she worked as the CEO of the Schox LLC, which was listed as one of the fastest growing companies in America for 5 years running when she was COO. She's the co-founder of Schox Philanthropy. That's an early morning. I haven't had my coffee. Thank you, Kate.
Okay. Philanthropy.
She's a general partner at Schox Venture Capital, which is a seed stage venture capital firm working around transportation that she can kind of dive into, and I won't attempt to explain. She's led investments in Gatic, Bear Flag, and Wise. She serves on several nonprofit and for-profit boards, 5 of the nonprofits actually. She just finished a management program at Harvard Business School, but as always, most importantly, she went to a school in Ann Arbor that we all have a connection to here at U of M. And that is why she's here today to talk to us about her experience, what she's done, what insights she's gathered, and all the good stuff that's happened over the past almost 20 years. So thank you for being here, Kate. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. Absolutely. I think it's probably important to set context. If you could give students a little bit of insight on Trucks and what it is that you're doing now and what it is that venture firm kind of targets, that would be a helpful place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started Trucks, the time flies. I think it was 6 years ago. And when we started out, my partners, Riley and my husband, Jeff, they really wanted to have just purely transportation focus, but they wanted to pull me in. And I was like, oh, I'm not that excited about transportation. I said, but what does excite me is climate change, environmentalism. I said, let's combine those two. Let's make it so that each and every investment that we do has a thesis. So we had a branding specialist come out and they dove into, what was in my brain and what in their brains. And we came up with a thesis that everything that we invest in has to be cleaner, safer, or more accessible, or all three would be fantastic. So we went out and we raised the first fund. We're now on the second fund. And the first time around, we're all a little bit new at this game. I mean, Jeff and I particularly had done a lot of angel investing over the years. And we were the first investors in Cruise. Actually, we're a little bit later in Cruise. We were the first investors in Twilio. And, we'd seen, thousands of companies between the patent law firm and going to demo days and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, back to where I was. So trucks. And so with this first one, we were writing a little bit smaller checks. We were getting into the rounds a little bit, later on during their raise, but always in the seed stage, sometimes pre-seed. So then comes Trucks Fund 2. And now we're writing bigger checks and we're leading them. We're taking more board seats. And we're really getting to this fun part where we're really, curating this portfolio of companies that we're really excited about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you and I talked a little bit about this in EHour students. You're all familiar. We typically try to highlight these areas of careers where alum have taken an attempt to do something, they've risked something, they've failed, and they've ultimately accomplished. To the comments you were making, it felt like this is something new to you and Jeff and Riley, and kind of venturing out into a new world. What gave you guys the confidence to take that risk and to kind of go out on that limb to do that and to try?
Yeah. Having failed at trying to raise a fund probably 6 times.
Okay, sure.
So yes, I'll kind of
through one of those examples. What is that? How did you fail? What happened?
Yeah, sure. I'll start from the beginning. So I was raised in Maryland. My parents were school teachers, and unfortunately, they got a divorce at some point. And I grew up pretty low means, and I had to learn for myself, like how to manage my finances. I put myself through college. I got scholarships to complete it. And so I had a really good foundation as a child and as in my early 20s to understand finances. So get married, move out to San Francisco, most expensive place in the world. We can barely pay our bills. We're doing anything we can to try to, survive in this place. And so what do? We just try. We try different things. We do work for equity. Well, guess what? That paid off. Okay, so now let's try something new. Maybe let's start an incubator. Okay, no, that was a complete and utter fail. Never even really took off the ground. Let's try, just a random venture fund. Let's try to go out and raise. Well, we didn't raise anything. That failed. Okay, well, why don't we just make some angel investments on the side and start to learn and take some classes? Oh, okay, that worked. Great. Let's go out and try to raise another fund. Nope, failed again. Okay, let's just amp up the angel investing. So you see how it goes. It's just like try, fail, and then things just kind of build upon each other to where you get to the point where you've made enough investments, you're trusted, and then you partner up with somebody else who has great industry knowledge, and that was Riley.
Got it. And kind of tacking back on that with the idea of the initial investment that came in and enabled you to be in a position to where you could even attempt to iterate and look at the different ways that you guys could spin off. A student question just came in asking kind of where did that initial capital come from? And was that something that came from local friends and family? Was that just generally speaking, where did it come from? And then conversely, how did you position yourself in a position to come out of school to be ready to do that outside of the knowledge, but the actual capital?
Yeah, so the actual capital came from myself and from Jeff. And that initial capital came from I'm in my mid 40s. Jeff and I have been together for 25 years. So this is a long history here. So close to 15 years ago was when we made some of those really early investments. And they took about 10 years to pay off. So So 15 years ago, made an investment, paid off, and that's where the initial capital came from. Because as venture capitalists, you do have to put in your own capital.
Yep. Okay. And to that line of thinking, I think I read that you and Jeff, maybe it was on the Schox.org website, you guys were talking about how way before Schox.org became a thing, you and Jeff were making small donations to small local kind of unbroadcast nonprofits that you were looking to invest in and help charitably, and how difficult you found that to be, to find the ones that actually could really make the wheels turn, were making an impact, and weren't just like the big behemoths that we all know of. And you talked about how that's kind of been practicing philanthropy. Describe to the students what that means, what that actually means to practice philanthropy, and how that's unique to what you're doing.
Exactly. So philanthropy is something that's been near and dear to my heart ever since I was a child. And I can thank my parents for that, and also my older sister, who really instilled that in me. And so I've been able to do this my whole life, mostly volunteering my time until I had money to actually give back. And, Jeff and I were also seeing that some of our friends who had already had exits and had, this pile of cash just didn't know what to do with it. And they didn't know who to give it to or how to give it. So we came up with this idea that if we get together, a pool of our best founders, and let's say 15, because that's the current cohort, and they all put in 1% of their equity. And then when one of them has an exit, that equity gets dispersed among all of them, and they all get to make donations. The other part of it is that with Schox Philanthropy, my coworker and I are going out there and we're using our VC skills to interview the nonprofits, to look at their finances, to see how they are working in the communities, looking at their history, and using all those skills to curate a list of great nonprofits. And so when our founders look at the nonprofits, they have a lot more information. They have essentially like a pitch that they're looking at, and they get to pick one. Well, we were fortunate enough that one of our founders did have an exit, and gave us enough money so that our first founders were able to practice philanthropy. So these are people that don't have money yet. Their money is all tied up in equity in their companies, and yet they were able to make significant checks to nonprofits that they really felt spoke to them.
Now, I mean, with your background in VC and now a philanthropic arm, and as the COO of kind of the law firm that you and Jeff had started up, you've seen a lot, and you've seen a lot of people and a lot of business situations and a lot of crossover to the nonprofit world. Disseminate some of that knowledge to students about where the similarities are between startups and nonprofits. What's similar? What are the distinctions when they're going to apply for their first job and they're going to interview companies essentially about where they want to work? What should they be taking note of? What should they be looking for to know, oh, I really want to work for this company, or hey, that's a red flag, heads up on that?
Yeah, I think the first thing that stands out to me is the importance of leadership. And I don't mean a single person leading, but actually how a team leads and how a team is integrated. How the CEO can rely on the COO and the CFO and have different components. I find that extremely important. I also think that diversity in a team is so important. When I see a team that looks the same, smells the same, acts the same, comes from the same place, that to me is not a solid team. One of the things I see a lot of, and no offense to anyone out there, is all male teams, especially when we're looking at from the VC side. And the first question I ask them always is, have you identified your first female hire? And they look at me and they're like, why? And I said, well, it will be really hard for you to hire more and more females if you don't start early. And so then, I have information and articles I give them to back all of that up, and it's not just women, we need to hire people that come from different parts of the world, come from different economic backgrounds, just all as much difference as you can is really important. So look for that when you're joining a team.
Yeah, that's critical. And that's not just talk that you put out there. You kind of walk this as well. I'm thinking about the no Mantles policy at
Yeah.
Trucks. Clue us in on that.
Yeah. So that Riley is a wordsmith, I've got to say. He's amazing at coming up with words. And what happened like early on in VC, actually, maybe even a little bit earlier when I was angel investing, I would show up to these VC conferences and networking events. And there are times where I was literally the only woman. And there was an instance where I was mistaken for the catering staff, as I was the only woman. And that kind of stuff just happens, right? It's hopefully we're making some changes. It's not going to happen much longer. But Riley just noticed that, wait a second, if we're going to be supporting women, we're not going to talk on panels that are all men. So that's where the mantle comes from. It's a portmanteau, like my last name is a portmanteau of Schaefer and Cox and Schox. Some people don't know that, but and so the other part is, so it's not just women for us either. In Trucks, we actually track the founders of our companies that are coming in to make sure that we're giving, second and third look to teams that are more diverse. Because what tends to happen in venture is that, and tends to happen in so many different careers and paths, is that we see the people that we know that look like us, that went to schools where we went to school, that grew up in places that we went with. For me, that are white, that are women, that are middle class, that type of thing. So we're really trying to see broader.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and to that line of thinking, I guess one of the questions I like to ask folks each week, and actually I'm thinking of another topic I want to hop into, because Riley was here actually a month ago today, talking with this class, and he touched on it a little bit, but I want to get your perspective for the students as well. Riley came up with the no Mantles concept, and speak to us a little bit, and speak to especially the students who might be more of the typical kind of demographic for an engineering background, about the importance of having allies and what it means to actually be an active ally, and not just to speak that or to put that on your profile or something. What does it mean in actual terms?
So we can't stand alone, and so I'll speak from where I am in my skin, which is as a white woman. I need support too. I can't do it all myself. And so I need the allies. I need the people like Riley who are understanding and who support me and who are on the same page. Because if we don't have the allies, we can't broaden our network. And if we can't broaden our network, then we're not going to make the reach, and we're not going to make the changes that we need to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the questions I want to ask, and kind of ask every week, is if you're given a magic wand and you can make, one change to, let's start with a couple different areas. I'll give you a couple different topics. You tell me the magic wand change you make, okay? Diversity within the startup community. It's the one magic wand change you would do.
30% Black founders.
Okay. The Bay Area, one magic wand change that you would do.
Oh goodness, it's so hard.
You've lived there for a while. We've got a lot of students who might have a perception of it, but they don't know it. So from an insider, long-term resident, what's the change that you would just magic wand make overnight?
Yes, I know what it is. It's going to be a little bit of a longer answer.
That's okay.
The Bay Area is very different now than it was when I moved here. And I miss the old Bay Area. I miss, I was a yoga teacher for a while. I miss the yoga teachers. I miss the artists. I miss the dancers. I miss, the demographic here has really changed, and I miss the way it used to be.
Okay, very well. Taking it to a trucks lens, transportation regulation. Undoubtedly, a lot of the startups that y'all invest in are contained and have parameters around them about transportation regulation, law, and policy. Magic wand overnight, what is it? What would you change?
Railroad.
Ooh, how so? What does that mean?
So if you, I mean, you've traveled, I'm sure. You go to Europe, you can get on a railroad. It's easy peasy. You're like speeding off your way from Paris to Aix-en-Provence, and you're there in a heartbeat, right? Is it anywhere like that? Anywhere close to that in the United States?
My Amtrak ride from Chicago to Detroit is not similar. No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would love to see regulations lifted for rail, and we get high-speed rail. I mean, I've read a couple books on this. It is such a huge topic. I'm sure you can think about just planting the seed of thinking about the automobile industry and the rail industry and that clash. That's where it's from. If we can go back in time and fix that, I think we would have a much different country.
Got it. Got it. It's good. So in the meantime, until we get that fix, it occurs to me that Trucks is in a position to where, in its attempt to tackle last mile mobility solutions and micromobility solutions, it's at least supplementing the problem and the existing infrastructure we have in place. For students who aren't as familiar with what micromobility means and with what that last mile problem actually entails, give them a rundown of what that is.
Sure. So, I mean, the easiest way to think about micromobility is to think about scooters, bikes, small mopeds, and that type of thing. And so the hardest thing is, what we call the last mile, and it's usually even less than that. But let's just imagine that you're in San Francisco and you get on the Caltrain from Stanford to San Francisco. Great. Now you're in the middle of downtown San Francisco, but you still have 3/4 of a mile to get to work. How are you going to get there? You can't walk there fast enough. Or maybe it's too hot of a day and you don't want to sweat on the way there. So what can you do is that you can pick up rental micromobility right there at the Caltrain, and then you can get to it. So that was the first part of your question on micromobility. I forget what the other question was.
Well, it was the notion of last mile, which I think you tackled as well in that answer, speaking about what that was.
There's also last mile delivery, which is a whole nother issue.
Right. I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a statement I'm not entirely sure of, but I hope you'll correct me if it's wrong. It seems that a lot of last mile solutions are not solutions that are going to further contribute through combustion engines to climate change and the issues of global warming. A lot of them seem to be centered around electric battery and lithium-ion battery use and energy production. To that same kind of line of thinking, I've seen that a lot of electric vehicles seem to be marketed to a male demographic and kind of a young male, rugged demographic, which is always bewildering because it's pretty common knowledge at this point in time that women are driving financial decisions, especially even as it relates to automobile purchases. Why is that happening? Who's doing it differently, if anyone? And yeah, just expound upon that if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I love that you brought that up. I was actually interviewed and there was an article written maybe a couple months ago about this exact issue. And they were asking the same questions, and I can speak directly to that. So I do now have an electric vehicle. I'm so excited. I love it. It is my favorite thing in the world. But I do agree that, I'm a lot smaller in stature. And so unfortunately, I like to drive a little bit of a bigger vehicle. All the electric vehicles at the time were too small for me until the Audi e-tron came out, which is what I'm driving, and I really do love it. And so it harks back to this notion of men running the house, men being the breadwinners. And I'm sure some of your audience probably doesn't remember a time when a woman actually couldn't get a bank account unless her husband signed for it, right? And so it all goes back to that. And it goes back to historical days of advertising, where they're advertising to men because men are the breadwinners and buying the cars, which, as we know, is not true. And so I think what we're going to see, and we're already starting to see it, is these whole new lines of electric vehicles are coming out. And, they're designed a little bit more for the soccer mom, which I unfortunately am one of those. You know, I've got a bunch of kids in my car and all the gear in the back. And up until recently, we didn't have an electric vehicle soccer mom car. We
Mm,
do, and they're coming.
fascinating. Yeah, it's just fascinating thoughts. You've also kind of spoken out about the idea of Senate Bill 826, which I will admit ignorance on. I do not know the Women on Boards bill, and I don't know the intricacies of it. But if you could give us some insight on that too, and how that's attempting to change the issue at hand.
Yeah, so this goes back also to what I was talking about on when you're looking at a company, you want to join a diverse company. The big reason for diversity is that because the more different ideas we have, the more backgrounds we have, the more fruitful conversations are and the better companies are and businesses are. So same thing for boards. When we have boards where everyone's coming from the same background, and typically, the demographic here would be an older, wealthier white man, that all the opinions we're getting here are from those types of people. And honestly, corporate boards really do run the country to a certain extent. And so if we want to make changes, one of the ways to do it is at the board level. And so in California, we are trying to get, equal, starting with women, we're trying to get 50-50 women on boards. And so a whole lot of new training seminars. Harvard has a new program for training women to get on boards. There's also some nonprofits here that I'm involved in. There are new websites out there that are kind of like LinkedIn that are connecting women with other women to help women to get on more and more boards. And I think that it could be a real game changer, starting with that. And then let's move on to getting African American on board, Latino, Latinx people on board, and just keep on going. Get as many different people from different backgrounds on boards as we can.
It's fascinating. I'm interested in kind of the juxtaposition between the interest in trying to find investment opportunities that are going to produce a magnitude of a return and a multi-X return, and then the need to find companies who are already doing the cleaner, greener, safer, who have a diverse team, who have a female founder. This, I would suspect that this is dramatically shrinking the pool of potential investments that you would look at. How has that made an advantageous situation for trucks, and how has it also kind of hampered your ability to grow? And is growth a priority for trucks in the sense of getting to become a large VC firm, or is it something where boutique is more of interest?
Yeah. This is where it's good to have free partners, to have ways of seeing things, first of all. I tend, as you can tell, a little bit more on the impact investment side of things. And then I get to get balanced out by my other partners. So yes, I do believe that being a little bit more boutique-ish is the way that we like to work. We like to have our hands in every aspect and element, and the bigger you grow, the less that happens. We also have just such an incredible deal flow and organizational strategy that we don't necessarily need to grow. And also because we are doing the seed stage and the pre-seed stage. There is sometimes a little bit of conflict between, making the big bucks and doing the right thing. But I also firmly believe that, number one, I feel like it's more important to do the right thing. And I also think that companies that are doing the right thing are going to generate more revenue because they're doing the right thing.
There'll be more of a market for it, per se, down the road.
Yep.
Makes sense. We have a student question that just came in. How do you balance this push for diversity with competence? What criteria do you have for accepting board members? And I presume that might mean board members for Schox LLC and the philanthropic arm and trucks.
Okay. So I don't actually accept board members. So I'm not quite clear on that question. And can you read the first part of the question again?
How do you balance this push for diversity with competence, which is a bit of a segue from what we just talked about, but I guess to say, well, I shouldn't presume the student question, but the need for finding diverse founders and CEOs, how is that reconciled with the lack of a talent pool out there? I guess, is there anything being done to expound upon the question? Is there anything being done by Schox to build a larger talent pool or to
Yeah,
increase the opportunities to find investable founders down the road?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'll start with a little bit of a story. I'm not going to say the person or the place, but I was taking a really important class, and there were no women speakers. And I reached out to the head of the class and I said, there are no women speakers. Is it possible you can get women speakers? And the answer I was given was, there aren't any in this area. And my answer to that is, you didn't look hard enough. Okay. And I'm sorry, but that is my answer. You didn't look hard enough. And so what kind of things can be done? I recently just read and took a class on inclusion and diversity training. And it was really fascinating on how you can change your application process. And this can be an application for anything. The example I'm going to give you was a particular university, and I can't remember, I think it might have been Carnegie Mellon, but on their application for their computer science program, it said, list the computer science programs or classes that you've already taken. And they were getting the smallest number of female applicants. Well, because women and girls were not given the opportunity to take computer classes, right? So what did they do? They eliminated that question. All of a sudden, they quadrupled the amount of women and girls that were applying and graduated. And then here we go. Now we have all these people in computer science. So that's just one simple thing to do. There's also this really amazing software program you can use that you can put an application through this AI, and it will pick out all of the words or phrases that are limiting, that are either speak to only men or speak to only white people, or so those are some small things that we can all do.
Got it. That makes total sense. I'll make a presumption, and you can correct me if it's wrong, but undoubtedly you've learned a ton. You've had so much experience, and the insights that you've gained, I would suspect there's probably a mentor or mentors somewhere along the way who you at least were able to absorb some of this from, or who you looked at and kind of saw the pathway that they blazed and said, I want to try to do something like that, or I want to learn from that. Speak to students about the notion of, if you look back at your career, why, not just why mentorship is so important, but what it is that you uniquely gain from it that you couldn't have gotten elsewhere. And the context behind why I asked that is that the use and engagement of mentorship resources and of being able to connect with the alumni base and alike has become increasingly a part of CFE's education, but especially even this course. It's now part of the formal assignments that students have to go through because of the fact that we feel it's such a vital skill set and such a vital thing for students to do in addition to their formal education. So if you could kind of paint the situation of what it is that you were able to benefit from mentorship that otherwise you would not have gotten, or maybe gotten as quickly.
Yeah, I think that one amazing part of a mentor-mentee relationship is that it's hard to push your own self. It's hard to push your own limits and your own boundaries. That's how we grow. We grow by getting out of our box. We grow by pushing the boundaries. And that's what I think the most important thing that a mentor can do. It's awesome when a mentor listens. It's awesome when, a mentor connects you with people in their circle. But the biggest and most important thing a mentor can do is to push their mentee. And I think without that, we don't grow and we don't increase. I've been incredibly fortunate. One of my biggest mentors was my older sister, and so I've had that person in my life my whole life. And without her, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today. And she was the one who pushed me, to move to San Francisco, because that's where I really wanted to go. She was the one who pushed me to go back to school. All of these pushes in my life. She's also the one that will question me. If I, make a wrong decision or something that just doesn't seem right, she's the first person to say, Kate, I'd really like you to look at that. She's not going to give me the answer, but she's going to say, look at that. 9 times out of 10, she's right. I needed to look at it and I needed to make a change.
That's fascinating. To some of those decisions that you've made, and one of them kind of I'm thinking about in particular, moving out to the Bay Area and shifting from a life that you knew in Maryland or you knew at Michigan to something brand new. Students come out of Ann Arbor and they disseminate all around the world. As they're preparing to do that, when you think back to your experience, and granted, SF is much different now, to your point, than it is then, what is it that you wish you would have known? What is it you wish somebody would have told you? What is it you wish you would have known to do or like at that time that students could be helped by doing before they decide to move off to anywhere?
Yeah, I think that, it's important to do a little bit of research. When Jeff and I decided to move, we knew that there were a couple things we needed. One of them was easy access to nature. The other one was a pretty consistent weather. I'm a little bit like, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I don't like it too hot and I don't like it too cold. I like it right in between here. And there are a couple other things, so figure out like, what are those like 4 or 5 key things that you just can't live without. Make a list of them and go through that. And I think another great thing is as soon as you get to where you're going, or maybe right beforehand, figure out a way that you're going to make friends. I made friends by taking a yoga training and, automatically had 30 brand new friends. And it was the best thing I ever did. So whatever that's going to be, figure that out beforehand so you can land and have the friends. Also, I think just know that change is hard, and it will be hard for, maybe the first couple months, but then it won't feel like change anymore, and it'll become your life.
That's phenomenal. Running off of that perspective, and that was such a solid set of advice there. Being in the Bay Area and being in the VC world that you work within, and being surrounded by the droves of tech talent that are produced here and coming out of Stanford and Berkeley and alike, and all, I always want to try to paint a picture to Michigan students about what distinguishes them from their peers, about what's going to make them, what's going to put them in an advantageous spot when they go to apply to a job at a Schox investment company or anywhere else for that matter. And you have some sense of kind of the reputation of what Michigan students have, of what makes them unique. Can you speak a little bit about what that is in the most candid of way? What is it that separates them for better and worse as they go into the real world?
Yeah, when we see students from Michigan, 99% of the time, they work harder than the students that we see that come out of the California schools. And I can't even tell you why or how, but I've seen it at the law firm. I've seen it in the venture world, but students from Michigan work harder. And I personally value that. I work really hard. And I think that that's really phenomenally important. What I'm trying to think of something that, because you said for better or for worse. I'm trying to think of.
I was wondering. I'll be honest with you. You're the first one I've posed the question to for worse. So if there's no answer, that's okay too.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the only thing that can come to mind is that a decent amount of the students that have come to us from Michigan that were born and raised in the Midwest have a very limited palate. And we like to eat a lot of insane, crazy food at the office. And they're like, oh, no, I'm not going to eat that. That's too spicy, or that looks weird, or yeah. So a limited palate, that's going to be my for worse.
Okay. All right. That's good. That's a very good answer. We got a student question that came in. Where do you think you would be right now if you never left Maryland?
Oh, interesting. If I never left Maryland, I probably would be a school teacher like my parents, and I probably would have stuck with teaching.
Absolutely. And we'll kind of wrap on a tie back to Michigan note here. Any particular place, spot on campus, restaurant, bar, what have you, that you and Jeff have strong memories of, or like that's your spot, or you guys always try to get to when you come back, or like?
Oh gosh, there are so many. Is Earth and Jar still there?
I wish the students could chime in because they could answer better than I could. I don't
Oh,
know.
okay.
Sorry. Earth and Jar.
Yeah, we used to love to go to Earth and Jar, but actually I would say the Arb. And the house that we have in Ann Arbor is across the street from the Arb. And just this past time we were there, we finally found a way, kind of like through our backyard, to get into the Arb, which is very exciting.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Truman will be going on many walks, I'm sure, as the weather comes in. So I just got confirmation that Earth and Jar is still there. So now you got another spot to add to the list. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for lending your time. Students, thank you for your time and attention, and everyone stay safe and go Blue.